My name's Louise Ansell, and I specialise in helping people to maximise their performance and well-being. And that's led me over the years to working with some incredibly fascinating people, ranging from business leaders that want to push their performance and to develop their skills and abilities to deal with different contexts, right the way through to extreme sports athletes who want to push themselves and their limits, if you like. It's been a fascinating journey of learning from my perspective, and over the years it's been really interesting to see some of the key themes and key habits that a lot of the high performers all share. Now, the focus for the next few minutes is going to be very much about providing some key observations, but most importantly, what I really want to do is to offer some quick strategies that anybody can start putting into action straight away. Now, we're going to talk about some topics that I've got to be honest with you, I could talk about for a long time. But what I'm going to say is, if you're listening and if you're watching and if you're thinking, actually, I want to do more of this and I want to know more about how I can apply these strategies right now in my life, if you do want to know more, then you can always get in touch with me at louise@skybounders.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn, so that's another good way. So we're going to kick off, and we're going to kick off straight away with 5 of the key themes that high performers share. Okay, so the key observations, if you like. So the first one is they're all crystal clear about what they're aiming for. But it's not just having this kind of goal that they're clear about. They know why they're aiming for it. So they have crystal clarity on that. Secondly, they strategically use their physiology and their psychology to maximise their performance. So it's not just a case of focusing on one or the other. They recognise the fact that the two are completely interlinked, and they don't just take an ad hoc approach to it. They take a strategic approach to it. The third thing is they stay very focused on the outcome that they desire, so their end goal, but they embrace the journey along the way. Next thing is they don't drift. If you actually look at the way they lead their lives, they live very consciously and very deliberately. They're conscious, they have a heightened level of awareness over how things are affecting them in what ways. They're highly aware of where they're going, what they're doing and why. They live deliberately in the sense that they don't find that the weeks have gone by and they haven't actually achieved what they set out to achieve. They don't let the days go by. They don't even let the minutes go by in terms of just sort of drifting along, suddenly realising they've spent hours on Facebook. It kind of doesn't happen because they take a very conscious, very deliberate approach to how they do things. The other thing that they do is they're very, very capable of managing their energy levels. So their energy levels and their focus. Most importantly, they're able to master their thought processes. Now, that's not 100% of the time, because that's actually not possible, but they're able to do it for the majority of the time. So with those things, I want to now say, okay, these are key observations from some of the high performers. Now, let's shift some of these concepts into concrete strategies that anybody can start applying. And we're going to start off by the first one being to get clear on what your vision is. So if you're going to take something away from this today, that would be the first thing I would suggest. Get really, really clear about what it is that you're wanting. But the very first thing I would start with is work out who you want to be. Who you want to be as a person. Now, that's actually quite an important question, and it helps you to clarify what's actually important to you in terms of how you want to be and how you want to lead your life. So who you want to be, what you want to achieve, and then why. Like, get really clear about what the fundamental why is for you. because it's different for each of us. But if you can get real clarity over what's really driving you, what your driving forces are, then that's going to really help you to keep going. Because one thing about high performance is it's only sustainable if you maintain certain things. And one of those things is the motivation to keep going. And unless you're very clear about what's going to motivate you and what's going to drive you to keep going, then you're going to stumble. So get really clear now about your vision, about who you want to be, what you want to achieve, and why. Now, I'm going to hazard a guess that if I was to say, well, who do you want to be? I don't think anybody that's listening right now would be thinking, you know what? I want to set up a business, and, you know, I want my business, I want it to be an okay business, you know, I want it to be okay. Or alternatively, I don't think you'd necessarily say, okay, well, I want to be a satisfactory parent. That's not kind of how people tend to think. Not people that are interested in habits for performance. Because actually, those kind of things don't drive you. That's not about being better than average. I don't say satisfactory and okay and everything else. So if your goals are more than average, are more than satisfactory, more than fine, and more than okay, then actually we now need to start taking an approach to ourselves in terms of our performance that's better than average. Now, we need to learn to stop being average. So the second thing that you can actually do is ditch being average. I'm going to phrase it a different way. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to say you can be any car you want in the world. You can be any car at all. Now, again, I don't think that anybody sat there right now listening to this thought to themselves, oh, I know, I want to be a grey Nissan. I think it's unlikely. Now, forgive me, if you own a grey Nissan, I'm sure they're wonderful cars. I really, really honestly do. But with the best will in the world, they're not high performance machines. They're not going to win sort of the awards for the most beautiful high performing machine ever. They're really not. They're going to get from A to B. You know, they're going to do all right. They'll get by. They'll do all right. But they're not high performance. A high performance machine is quite different. May or may not look like this. But high performance actually requires different kinds of approaches to be high performance. At the end of the day, if we think about cars, like every single car needs certain things. So every car, including that grey Nissan, needs fuel. Every single car needs some kind of maintenance and fine tuning. You know, it does. It needs, you know, wheels and fuel, and it needs air in the tyres, and it needs that stuff. And every single car needs some kind of gear function. And yeah, in terms of, you know, whether or not you can get by with average fuel, average maintenance, and average gears, yeah, you can get by if you want to be a grey Nissan. But if you actually want to achieve some kind of high performance in your life, whether that's as a parent, whether it's as a business owner, whether it's in some other facet of your life, then you actually need to take a different kind of approach. You actually need to work out what the right kind of fuel is for your machine. You need to work out what kind of tuning is needed for that car to be a high performance car. And you need to get really good at efficiency of shifting those gears. But it's not just that. The other thing is actually taking a very strategic approach and saying, okay, well, what's working and what's not? It's interesting because when I speak to people, they say, yeah, I want to push myself. I want to get better, and I want to do more with my life. I want to live, so that I really feel that I'm achieving. They sort of have all of these things in mind, and I say, okay, well, what have you done so far in terms of taking action to maximise how you perform in different ways? And say, well, I eat healthy. I've tried meditation. I think I'm not sure whether it was working or not. I don't know. I got a bit bored quite a lot of the time, if I'm honest with you. I mean, I kept it up for a while. I haven't done it for quite a while though. Now, Like, let's go back to the car analogy. If you were to say to a racing team and they're getting ready for a race and you say, okay, what are you going to do? What have you done so far in terms of this car to get it ready for high performance? You know, if they were to turn around and say, well, you know, we put a new tyre on, it looks good, I think. We had a bit of a twiddle with the engine, think it's worked. Quite clearly, they're not going to take that approach. Quite clearly, they're actually going to analyse what's going on. They're going to seek to measure and systematically make changes that work effectively. And if the changes aren't working, they're going to ditch them and they're going to do something else. And that's kind of where we need to get to. If we're expecting some kind of high performance in any way, then we need to start taking a more strategic approach to what we're doing. So the third thing that you can do to actually put this into action is set up a system so that you actually know what's working and what's not in terms of your well-being and performance. So there are different ways that you can do this. You can do it the old school way, which a lot of people really like, is actually just pen and paper, have a journal and journal it. So that's one approach. The other way is that you actually use some of the technology out there to help you out. Now, in terms of what's available, there are lots of different things that we've got in terms of monitoring our performance physically. So, for example, Apple Watches and Fitbits are two that spring to mind, but there are many others. And they're really good in the sense that you can get a real, pretty good understanding of your activity levels, your heart rate, how much you're sleeping, that kind of thing. So that's useful to us. But we need more than just the physiological side of things. We also need some form of measuring what's going on in terms of our psychological performance as well. Now, again, you could make notes on it. So it could be that you say to yourself, I'm going to actually analyse what activities I do in some way, and I'm going to see what my concentration levels are like throughout the day, what my energy levels are like throughout the day, what my confidence is like throughout the day, what my general mood state is like, and so on. You could do it that way. The other thing that you can do is actually use some of the apps available. These are still, they're very much in the budding stages. This is an app, so Dailyo is an app that I'm recommending at the moment to some of the coaching clients that I'm working with. And the reason that I like it is it's very quick and easy to use. You can have a free version, but the premium version is less than a coffee a month. And what the paid version enables you to do is to actually edit your categories, which means you've actually got an app where you can measure what activities you do during the day in relation to certain aspects of your performance. Now, what that means is you've then got a graphical representation of what's going on. So, for example, if you decide that you're going to start eating in a certain way, you're going to start exercising in a certain way, you're going to start meditating, visualization, whatever else, then you actually want to be able to measure whether those things are making a difference. So this enables you to do that. So these are some ways of tracking. Whatever system you decide, you need something in place so that you know when you're actually making changes, you're able to analyse whether or not those changes are working for you or not, and whether your performance is increasing or in fact decreasing. So the next thing is to actually say to ourselves, what kind of changes, what kind of activities? Now, I think what's important to recognise is there are absolutely thousands of different things that you could try to enhance your performance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share certain ones that repeatedly shown in research and repeatedly I've seen in terms of people's performance that make the biggest difference. But I want to do it in a way where it's kind of structured for you. So we're going to start off with fuel, because in the same way that a high performance machine needs fuel, so do we. And fuel for a car takes different forms. And in terms of high performance, we need certain types of fuel in certain quantities at certain times of the day. Now that's actually the same with us. But I want you to recognise that it's not just a case of having fuel into your system and then you perform. It doesn't kind of work as simply as that. What our fuel does in different ways is make changes to how we're thinking and feeling. So, for example, everything that we put into our body and even the activities that we take part in have changes to us in terms of how our brain's functioning and how our body's functioning. So, for example, there are chemical changes when we, let's say, spend time with a loved one, can actually result in chemical changes that make us feel differently. Similarly, there are chemical changes when we eat certain foods that make us feel, respond, and act differently. We've got a whole range. So here we've got sort of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. But don't forget, you've also got other things that happen as well, such as cortisol, the stress hormone. And again, certain activities, go for, I don't know, it could be take part in an Ironman, your cortisol, so your stress hormone, will actually increase as a result. Now, the things that we do, the way that we fuel ourselves, has an impact on us physiologically, which then affects how we perform. It's not just a chemical reaction. It's also about energy. Everything we do either fuels us or depletes us of energy. Now, when you look at high performers, they're very aware of this. Now, in terms of their energy and their focus, they want to stay as full as they possibly can. And they're also very aware of things that start to deplete the energy levels. Now, when it reaches the point where the energy is completely depleted, that is very definitely the time, if they haven't done before, that they eliminate whatever's causing the problem. And at that point, they then focus again on maintaining optimum levels of energy. And it's through our fuel intake that we do this. So the next thing, we need to take conscious control of our fuel intake. Now, that's working out what is fueling you positively, what's giving you energy, what's making you perform well, and what's not. And we need to limit what's not working for us. And it's that bit that people don't tend to do. The other thing that people don't tend to do is actually make themselves aware of how fuel is affecting us in different ways. So you've got different types. So we've got physical fuel. So when I refer to physical fuel, what I'm talking about here are the things that actually affect us directly physically. So as you'll see just there, we've got nutrition listed, followed by movement, rest or sleep, and environment. That's four of the key ones. So let's just take a few examples here. And again, we could say a lot on each of these subjects, but I'm just going to give you a few examples so you get a gist of what I mean by some of this. We're often told to eat healthily. I've been told it for most of my life, you must eat healthily. And I've kind of listened to it and thought, yeah, we've got to eat healthily, it makes a difference. Yeah, we want to live longer. But I tell you what, the point I started realising the effect that nutrition has on our performance, I didn't take it as seriously as I should have done. Now, simple things such as what we choose to eat doesn't just affect whether or not we put on weight, whether or not we feel as though we've got energy. It actually affects how our brain is functioning. Things like the B vitamins, magnesium, selenium, iron, omega-3, omega-6, these will probably all be sort of there in your sort of mind, if you like, as these nutrition that we should be having. But these things are actually identified in studies on well-being and performance. Like, they affect our concentration levels. If you don't get enough of these nutrients, then your brain will not function as effectively. It just can't. Similarly, things like serotonin, which is part of our well-being hormone, actually is directly as a result of what you eat. So if you're not eating certain things, such as leafy vegetables being a classic one, other ones being power foods such as seeds, nuts, that kind of thing, you're missing a trick when it comes to performance, because that's where all the good stuff is. That's the stuff that we're actually needing when it comes to our cognitive performance and performance overall. So it's not just a case of eating healthily, it's actually saying, okay, well, what does that mean? How is it actually going to affect me? But it's not just making sure you do eat the right things, it's also working out what goes against that. So for example, refined sugar. Oh, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of sugar, is there? Well, you know what, there's not a little bit of sugar, but it's also worth recognising, well, that little bit of sugar is actually having an impact on your body's ability to process other nutrients. It's actually having an effect on your body's ability to process some of the things that your body needs to perform really, really well. So it's taking away some of the goodness that you're getting from other stuff. So it's actually having quite a big impact. Similarly, as many as you know, I'm not averse to a glass of wine. But we also need to recognise that if we choose to have alcohol, the alcohol itself actually eliminates some of the nutrients that are needed for high performance. So it's not just about don't drink too much, it'll give you a hangover and you'll feel rough the next day. It's more than that, much more than that. Because I tell you what, we could have dinner together right now. We could have like the almighty superfood workout. We could have the leafy green veg. We could have the nuts, the seeds. We could have everything. We would be jam-packed full of all the nutrients that we would need to maintain optimum levels of well-being. We're going to feel really good. But on top of that, we're going to be able to think really clearly. We're going to be able to perform at our best. And then we'll share a bottle of wine and have one of those nice pastries. And you know what? We're going to get rid of everything that we just tried to put into our bodies because we're depleting our body's ability to actually process the stuff that we need. That makes a big difference. Just things like this, being aware of how that kind of fuel is affecting you is important. Similarly, we can come on to other things such as movement. I've deliberately put movement here and not exercise. I believe in exercise. I think it's good for you. It gets the endorphins flowing, and that's very good. And it stimulates all sorts of thought processes. But I think one thing that's even more important in some ways is recognizing that actually, as human beings, we need to move. Our brain needs us to move, and we're becoming increasingly stationary. Particularly at the moment, right now, we're in the middle of lockdown still for many of us. So we're very static, sitting in front of laptops a lot. And it doesn't just apply at the moment. And it's not just people who work in offices. Interestingly, they've done some studies on the activity levels and movement levels of even pro footballers. And they've discovered that although they might have an intense bout of training in a day, up to 16 hours of their day after that training is predominantly stationary. Now, the reason this is important is you've got to recognize what your brain needs to function really well. It needs oxygen. If it's not getting oxygenated blood to it, it's not going to perform well. If you sit still, then you're not enabling your brain to get maximum levels of oxygen. So actually making sure that you regularly move and shift the oxygen around is really going to help in terms of performance. Coming on to the next one in terms of rest. Again, I could have put sleep for this one. There's so much research on the benefits and the importance of sleep at the moment. It's perhaps no surprise that many of the top corporations are incorporating sleep pods and everything else for their workers. Sleep is important, and it's still recommended that it should be between 7 and 9 hours a night for people. They've also started sort of looking in more detail at what time of day is important for people as well. So, for example, there's quite a wealth of research that would suggest that going to bed earlier, before the hour of midnight, is much more beneficial than having the same amount of time but going to bed after midnight. Now, one thing that I'm going to say is we are all unique. And this is one of the key things. We kind of have these tips, but you've got to recognize that we are all unique and you need to work out what works for you and what doesn't. But I deliberately haven't listed sleep here because rest is the overarching, much more important principle. We all need rest, and we need rest in different ways. We need rest during the day, and we need rest between things, in addition to needing sleep. Now, this is the mistake, and there's the slight misperception because everybody thinks high performers are busy on the go, 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 go. Actually, can they maintain that speed? Yes, they can. They can go, 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 go. But one of the reasons that they can do that is because they look after their performance in lots of different ways, and because they make sure that they get time for recovery and time for rest. So actually, rest is really important, and it's a case of working out what you would benefit from, and both in terms of your sleep, but rest between certain things as well. And the final thing on there is about the environment that we're in. Now, take a quick look at this picture. This person, I mean, straight away, this person doesn't look particularly happy with the world. If you just take a look at the person's environment, what's quite interesting is you could say, well, that's a very busy person. And you might even be forgiven for thinking, well, he's obviously very busy, he must be quite successful. I mean, you know, that's a possibility. But one thing's for sure, the environment that he's in will be influencing the way that his brain is functioning. And that applies to all of us. Many people comment that they find clear, tidy environments much calmer. There's very good reasons for that. Every stimulation for your brain is using energy. If you are in an environment in which you've got lots of noise, it uses up more brain energy. So for those of you that always think that you feel more tired when you've done, you know, a day in a busy shopping centre than you do when you've worked out for a few hours, there's a good reason for it. Because actually it's the overstimulation, and we have it with our vision as well. So when you are in an environment when you've got a lot in front of you, particularly if you've got a lot of screen activity in front of you, so the thing with screen activity is it's also moving, you've got light associated with it as well, and when notifications come in, it's triggering. All of that is stimulating, and all of that is depleting the energy that your brain could be using for other things. So actually, it's thinking through what kind of environment is best for my performance, because we want to conserve our energy so that it is devoted to the right kinds of things. Don't waste it on 3 screens and a load of tut on your desk if you don't need to. It's a very quick and easy thing is to say, okay, well, I'm going to conserve my energy. I'm going to close down excess windows. I'm going to look at 1 screen at a time, and I'm not going to have a load of tut in front of me. But work out what works for you. But unless you try and explore these things, you won't necessarily know. So you've got physical fuel, but you've also got psychological fuel. So some of these things are quite interesting. You've got things like people. People are part of our fuel. We're social creatures. The interactions that we have with others will serve to energize us, or they'll serve to deplete those energy levels. People who are focused on performance, and particularly high performers, are very careful about how they devote their energy to other people. In other words, they're quite particular about who they choose to spend significant amounts of time with. It doesn't mean, you know, dismiss everybody in your life that you find a bit of a drain. It just means maybe start thinking through who energizes, who leaves you feeling vibed up and positive, raring to go. And, you know, if there are other people that have the opposite effect, then maybe it's time to start limiting some of their fuel. You've also got media just there. Media is a big one. It's a big category that encompasses a whole range of things, from social media in all the different platforms, through to films, through to games as well, through to the news. It is a form of fuel. The time that you are devoting to it, you are fueling your mind, and you are fueling your mind in certain ways. Now, it's worth now starting to say, how much of my time and energy do I want to devote to these things? Some of these things might be energizing you and helping your performance, but I absolutely guarantee that a significant proportion of media actually will have the opposite effect. So it's a case of saying, okay, out of the media time that I have, how much of that is working for me, and what's not working? If it's not working, ditch it. Stop wasting that energy. It's not worth it. Then you've also got learning. Now, learning in particular is an embedded habit within high performers. That's without exception. And learning can take all sorts of different forms. It could be audiobooks, it could be having a mentor, coaches, so having personal coach in different ways, through to doing training courses and attending seminars such as the one that you're part of at the moment. So learning in lots of different ways. You can learn lots of different topics, but one thing that's very clear for high performers, they're very focused in what it is that they're wanting to learn, and they do it in a very time efficient way. So they will work out what in particular they're trying to get out of things. There are different ways that you can approach it. So learning from the sense of getting a quick summary of books, for example, before spending a significant proportion of your time and energy on that book. Another thing that you can use is Blinkist and other equivalent things. So Blinkist is an app that just literally gives you the bullet point key points. Listening to audiobooks and podcasts whilst they're doing other things is a way of managing time. However they approach it, it is there and it is part of their daily routine. It is a fundamental core practice. It is an embedded belief that learning drives you forward. It is part of being a high performer. Similarly, gratitude. Gratitude practices come in a range of different shapes and sizes, but again, all high performers, almost without exception, have some kind of gratitude practice, whether that's writing 3 things down at the end of each day, or starting the day with 3 things at least, or having a gratitude jar, which some people opt for, or using apps. However they do it, it is there. It is part of their day because in terms of psychological fuel, it gets you thinking in a certain way that is good for your well-being and performance. Meditation and visualization both feature really, really highly. When you look at the research behind both, they are incredibly effective at keeping you focused, but also helping to manage energy as well. So again, it's not a case of every high performer meditates for an hour at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's not the case. But there is definitely a common theme that high performers typically will have some kind of meditation and visualization practice. The visualization in particular helps them to stay focused on where they're aiming for and why. So it is a daily part of their practice. Contribution and adding value to others is also a key form of fuel. So working out ways in which you can actually think about other people beyond yourself and giving to others and adding value. And this applies in different contexts, but generally speaking, you will find that people who have sustainable levels of well-being and performance have a strong desire to help and to support other people in some way, and they will actively seek out ways to do so. And the final one down there is about joy. I think people often think that it's always got to be serious, particularly in business. It's like, well, it's not business. It's not business, it's fun. It's the serious stuff. And it's like, well, actually, you know what? In terms of maintaining high performance, your well-being is a fundamental part of that. Performance is not sustainable without maintaining well-being, and actually for well-being to be maintainable, joy is also part of that. So seeking joy, taking time out to enjoy life, you know, it could just be for 10-15 minutes throughout the day, through to making sure they actually have time for breaks away, so weekends away, for example, or time out in some way, shape or form. But it's actively seeking joy and time out. So you've got physical fuel, you've got psychological fuel. That's very much a whistle-stop tour of the key ones that come up repeatedly when it comes to maximising performance. But it's not just about the fuel, it's also about the fine-tuning as well. Now, when it comes to fine-tuning a car, we do that in a number of different ways, but it's done on a regular basis. And if you don't fine-tune a car, when you're expecting high performance, you soon find that problems start to creep up. When it comes to us and fine-tuning, one thing that we need to be really clear about is what we're doing on a regular basis that is affecting us. So the next thing that you can do is get really, really clear with yourself, get real with yourself about what your habits are. And this is what, when I say get real, I mean be honest with yourself, because you will have things that you do on a regular basis that are influencing you, either in a good way or in a bad way. But often we like to pretend we don't do them that often. And, you know, oh, we just do it occasionally, whatever else. You know, get real with what your habits are, because you've got subconscious ones and you've got conscious ones. And until you're clear about them, it's highly likely that you've actually got ingrained habits that are going to be holding you back. So key things when it comes from a performance point of view, in terms of high performers, they're looking to maximize energy and keep focus. That's what their routines are about. And that's what we need to do. So first of all, they make sure they get started in the right way. So they actually have rituals to get started with. Now, when I say get started, this is in preparation for things. So the morning ritual is actually the most important ritual of anybody. And, it doesn't have to be starting the day at 4 a.m. and, doing a billion things before you actually start work. That's not the case. But you do need a ritual that works for you. And we need to establish what ritual is going to work. But I'm going to tell you right now that you might as well get a head start. You need something in there that's going to get oxygen moving around your body, so you need to move. Visualization, so you're dead focused on what your outcomes are for the future, but also the day ahead. And learning gratitude need to come into it if you're really wanting to maximize performance. But work out what is working for you in terms of your morning ritual. At the moment, you will have a morning ritual. You might not call it that, but there'll be a routine that you do. It might be falling out of bed and grabbing a coffee and falling onto the laptop. That's a ritual. It's setting you up in one way or another. So it's taking control over what your morning ritual is. So it's really setting you up for the day ahead. But it's not just the morning, it's also before events and before meetings, before key things that are going to be important to them. Even before a conversation, let's say with their children on the phone, they think through, okay, what do I want to, what's my outcome here? What do I want to achieve by this? So they actually have a ritual where they think through, okay, what outcome is my desired outcome right now? Am I in the right mindset for it? They don't just blunder through events throughout the day. Secondly, is maximising outcomes, and in particular focus on time. So lots of people approach time in loads of different ways. You'll have your own chosen strategies. One thing that I'm going to suggest is ditch the to-do lists. Now, when I say that, what I'm referring to is everybody dives into, I must do this, and then they list off 100 things. When in actual fact, if you start with what outcomes you're after, so you think to yourself, what do I need to achieve? Then work out what activities need to happen for those outcomes to actually come to fruition. So start with your outcomes. Similarly, when it comes to time, high performers don't think about time in terms of I work from 9 till 5. What they actually do is look at time and say, okay, how do I most efficiently achieve the outcomes I need to achieve? Therefore, they're outcome driven rather than time driven or logging hours driven. It's not their approach, it's outcome driven. They keep on track by minimizing distractions. So going back to those screens, that's an example of a distraction. Similarly, notifications are a distraction. Again, it's a myth that high performers can juggle a whole load of different things. They don't do that. They focus on one thing, they ignore other things while they're doing it, then they'll focus on that. That way they give their full attention, they get it done, they move on to the next thing. And that applies to their interactions with people as well. So if they're focusing on something and the phone rings, the phone can carry on ringing. They're not going to answer it because at that point in time, they're actually focused. Because if you think about it, the more time you get distracted, the less efficient you are. Therefore, your energy is being sapped away. So for maximum energy and performance, you need to stay focused, stay on track. Doesn't mean don't make time for the other things. Pick up the phone to that person or arrange a time afterwards, but don't just get distracted in different ways. And then down at the bottom there, you've got dealing with curveballs, and that's dealing with problems along the way, because even high performers, no matter how good they are going to have problems along the way. But rather than those problems being completely annihilating for them, they are disappointing. They feel the emotion, they are human, but they then know how to shift their mindset to get going again. And one of the key ways they do that is by focusing on the learning that they can get from the curveball, from the failure, from the setback. It's like, okay, this has happened. This feels rubbish. I don't feel great about this right this minute. Okay, what can I learn from it for the future? How do we move on from here? And then they shift focus. So they shift their mindset. So this is the third thing we talked about in terms of the car. It's the gear shift. It's the same for us. So we need to be able to start training ourselves to actively shift our mindset on demand, so that our emotions and thoughts aren't running the roost. We're in control of them. And we do that through a training process where we can employ certain things. So key things, shifting your mindset. The very first thing that we need to be able to do is develop the awareness of our mindset. And I know that sounds strange, but you need to be aware of what mindset you're in, rather than just drifting through the day thinking, oh, I don't really feel that great at the moment, but never mind, I'll carry on. It's like, become aware. Yeah, if you suddenly become aware, actually, you know what, I feel really negative, down, I'm not concentrating properly right now, I'm not in the right mindset right now. That's the starting point. At that point, work out what your desired outcome is. So let's say you're going into, it could be a big meeting. Maybe you got a meeting with some investors or something like that. And beforehand, you become aware that you're not in a confidence place as you're going into that meeting. So the first thing is awareness. The second thing is like, okay, what is my desired outcome? Desired outcome, I want to go in there feeling confident. I want to speak clearly. I want to offer them everything I can right now that's going to help them to understand why this is an amazing opportunity to actually be part of my business. So that's your desired outcome. The next thing is to say, okay, for that, I need confidence. I need a confident mindset, one that's energetic and confident. Then use your physiology, use the language that you've got running through your mind, and change your focus so that you actually trigger the right mindset for that context. And you can do that with a whole range of different situations. You can do it when you need to calm down. You can do it when you need to energize. But the first step is becoming aware of your mindset, aware of your outcome, and then saying, okay, how can I change my physiology immediately? How can I change my language immediately? And how can I change my focus? So in summary, in terms of high performers and in terms of what we can do and what I recommend, get crystal clear about what you're aiming for and why. Strategically use your physiology and psychology to maximize your performance. Focus on the outcome and embrace the journey. Don't drift. Live consciously and deliberately. And manage your energy and master your thought processes. What we've done is gone through an approach that you can actually start putting into action today. And we've broken it down into the fuel for your mind and your performance, into how you can fine-tune your performance in different ways through your routines and rituals and key ways in which you can actually shift gear when you need to in the most efficient way. So I guess it's up to you. You can aim to be that grey Nissan. There's nothing wrong with being a grey Nissan. There's nothing wrong at all. But if you're wanting dreams and goals that are better than average, then actually it's about putting into action strategies that are going to enable you the best chance to be able to perform. So I guess what I'm saying is, at this point, it's over to you. And it's the start of that journey in many ways, but it's one that's an exciting one that you will see results from. And if you want help along the way, then feel free to get in touch. And you can contact me either on LinkedIn or Louise at skybounders.com.